out, and it was getting dark. And I started seeing these 7-gill sharks around me. There was 2 of them. And I realized that I needed a quicker way of getting fish out of, cutting a fish out of kelp. Another story, a friend of mine once called me over to cut a fish of his out of the kelp because it was just too deep for him to dive, or he couldn't get his ears cleared. So I dove down, and the way I cut a fish out of kelp is this. I never touch the fish. Most people think you go and you grab the fish and you just start cutting the kelp around it. No, I take this big knife of mine and I go down 10 feet under the fish and I just start cutting all the kelp underneath the fish. And as soon as it just rises to the surface, okay? That's the way you cut a fish out of kelp. Number 2, if you have a fish that you think you're going to lose in the kelp, a lot of people think, well, I'm going to take my stringer, I'm going to grab him by the gills, I'm going to stab him in the top of the head, you know, and do the old scramble of the brain. Well, that takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of oxygen, and it's very tiring. What I recommend you do is learn where a fish's heart is, and then take this long knife right here, learn where the heart is on a 50-pound white, and you take this and you just stab it into his heart. Because when you put that blade through a fish's heart, he will stop swimming. It's much easier than trying to get a fish's backbone. And when you're cutting a fish out, usually you've got adrenaline in your system. And that is the #1 killer of bottom time. We lost a diver in the 5-minute kelp here about 20 years ago. He shot a white, he was going to cut it out. His buddy said, "Do you need any help?" He said, "No." We never saw him again. So he probably dove down, heart was beaten, it was one of his first whites, and he lost his life because of it. In big water, in blue water, one of the major things that you should always remember is you're a bird on the wire when you have your line out. You've got a big fish on the end of the line. You never want to pull the line towards you. You want to swim along the line just like a bird on a wire. Why? Because if you pull that line into you, what you wind up with is a pile of spaghetti that may catch your fins. And what will happen? A big shark may come by, grab your fish, and take off and pull you down with it. Your fish may revive and pull you down with it. I've seen that happen many times with wahoo. Or your line may be out there and some boat comes by wanting to see, you know, a fisherman wanting to hassle you or buzz you. He gets his line, he gets your line wrapped in his prop, and bango, he pulls you into his boat. So when you're working a fish on a line, you want a straight line, you don't want to pull it to you in spaghetti, and you want to swim along that line. Know your breathing. Know how many breaths it takes to do what you're doing. When I dove the Nationals here in San Diego in 1970, I started the meet with 13 breaths for every dive. 13 deep breaths. And by the end of the meet, I was counting 33 breaths because of the fatigue and exhaustion. So know your bottom time and how many times you have to breathe. When you have a fish, especially a big fish, and you've got a shaft in him, try to get the shaft out before you put the fish in the boat. The reason being, you get a big tuna in a boat with a shaft in it, and if that tuna starts whipping around, that shaft may kill your pongero. It may put his eye out. It may hit you in the head. Try to get that shaft out of the fish before you put him in the boat. Cutting a tip out is best done after the trip. Sometimes you get a tip buried really deep. Sometimes it's best just to cut it off, put on another tip, and cut it out when you have plenty of time and plenty of gear. There are non-apparent dangers in diving, especially in trips, long trips, and those are boarding a boat in rough seas. It is one of the most dangerous things you can possibly do, and the scenario I envision, and I caution the guys at San Benedicto, is that our boat stern is high, the panga is low. And what happens is when people return to the boat, they get on the edge of the panga and they put their toes over the edge as they start to get on the boat. And what will happen is the water will rise and it'll cut your toes off. Or it'll smash your toes so badly that the trip is over. We have to take you back to the dock and have you fly back to your home. So when you get off a boat, on a big boat, and especially in a panga, make sure you keep your toes away from the edge of your panga. I have a thing I call what-if scenarios, and I'll close with this, and this is really important. We in the fire department go through this a lot. We try to imagine what is the worst possible thing that could happen before it happens, and we prepare for it. So I'm going to give you a scenario that I have actually seen one time. You're diving blue water, your friend shoots a fish, he's pulling it in, all of a sudden the fish takes off, and bango, he's tangled in the line, and the fish is pulling him by, and he's going right by in front of you, and the fish is pulling him down, and you're about to say goodbye to your friend. What should you do? These are the kind of scenarios you need to do in advance, because you'll never come up with the right answer if you wait till it happens. Guy's being pulled by a fish, line wrapped around his legs or his arms or wherever. Shoot across his line, because once your shaft goes across his line, it will toggle on the line, pull back, and you'll be able to pull your friend up. Most people say, well, shoot the fish. Well, you might miss the fish, but it's so easy to shoot across a line. Okay, and here's something that I guarantee is the first time you've ever heard. When should you shoot your friend with your spear gun? When should you shoot your friend with a spear gun? This really is a test of friendship. You're in San Benedicto. You're on the surface. You see your friend. He's coming up from a deep dive. He's 40 feet below you, and all of a sudden you realize he's blacked out. Okay? You're going to haul ass down. You're going to try and rescue him. You're going to go to him. You're going to pop his weight belt, ideally. But what if you can't? What if you can't get there? What if he's just drifting away? You're like, from me to Marty. Okay? You may have to shoot him to save his life. Or what you may do is you may charge him, take your tip, and feed it down right between the weight belt and the wetsuit. Or catch part of the wetsuit, pull the trigger, so that you have some hold on him. And then make your way to the surface and pulling him up. Because if you're in deep water, we're talking 1,000 feet, 300 feet, water that you're never going to be able to free dive to, and he blacks out, he's gone forever. It's much better to shoot a man through the thigh, through the edge of the suit, than to lose a friend. And the other thing is, when you recover somebody who is drowned, somebody who has been blacked out, remember this, that in a large percentage of drowning cases, there is no water in the lungs. Salt water gets on the larynx, causes the larynx to spasm and shuts. Call it a laryngospasm. Jerome Odell in Florida has documented cases of people being submerged 17, 20, and 22 minutes, recovering with no brain damage. So just because somebody's passed out, blacked out, and been down, get him up, do CPR, no CPR, and follow through, and keep at it. Number two, if you're doing CPR on somebody, get a towel, because there may be a lot of vomitus that's going to come out of his mouth. You want to get as much of that vomitus as you can on that towel and out of his mouth, because when you blow vomitus into a person's lungs, it results in necrotizing pneumonitis, which is a fancy way of saying tissue death and lung inflammation. So have a towel and swab out that mouth if you're doing CPR on somebody. That's about all I have to say with regard to safety.